best restaurant in Windham, New York. I'm Mariana LeMan. Just me, myself, and I. My son Justice is taking the morning off today, but we, the proverbial we, are very excited to be sharing a brand new recipe for us to you. This one comes from the original Catskill Mountain Cookbook. I had mentioned the other day that we got this book in the mail, and this is the reprinted for the bicentennial, 1776 to 1976. Now, Albergo Allegria is Italian for the Inn of Happiness, and we are part of the original Osborn house property. So if you go to albergousa.com, you'll see a little bit of the history behind the inn, Osbornville versus Windham, and the little bit of the argument that George W. Osborn had with Zadock Pratt about the naming of the town. So I want to share this recipe with you. In this book, there's a recipe for a family pudding, and this is not at all what I expected to see. This is the family pudding right here. It's more like a quick bread. But this recipe comes from Mrs. George W. Osborn, so the proprietor's wife, the woman of the house and the property. So it's really neat and kind of nostalgic to be making a recipe today in 2020 that was done some time ago. The Osborn house, our first building, was built around 1892, part of a barber home, a kid home. And it's just neat to know about the history and the heritage. Of course, the eggs and the milk would have been gotten from the 500-acre adjacent farm. The Osborn house, I believe, had 300 acres at one point of a working farm, and then it turned into the resort complex or the summer housing. People used to escape the city to come up here during tuberculosis and even just to escape the heat of the city. So the very affluent and the socialites would come up to what was the Catskill Mountain House, which was America's first hotel resort back in the 1800s. So our area here in Greene County, New York, is steeped with hospitality and history of a place to vacation and get away. So when you're ready to get away, you don't need to come too far. We're here. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. So we're really excited. In any case, we're going to go ahead and the recipe, the formatting is a little bit different back in the day when they printed the book. So I did the recipe twice because honestly I goofed up the first time. Didn't really goof up, but I was supposed to cream the sugar with the egg, and I didn't. I put the sugar in with the flour. So I figured, you know what, let me try it a second time just in case it comes out different. I'll do it per the recipe, and if you all have been following me, you know that I follow recipes and then I do my own thing. So I did make a little addition into this one, which was adding pure vanilla extract. But in any case, I'm just going to show you what I have here. Now, since I'm a little bit different, since I'm in here by myself, it's like the original video post where I kind of pop in and pop out of the screen. But this is the pudding. It's supposed to be served warm. It's gorgeous. Smells very fragrant, with a little bit of maple syrup. Those of you that know me know that I'm not a real huge sugar fan, so for me this was sweet enough. I just added a little bit of butter on top. It melted and it was quite lovely. And then this is your other one. This one's still warm. It actually just came out of the oven. So let's go ahead and start. My oven is preheated to 350, and of course these recipes, they don't tell you how to preheat the oven. They don't tell you a lot. Mrs. George W. Osborn actually told us to separate the dry ingredients from the wet ingredients and fold them in, but certain things it's just a given, or it's a given that you know what you're doing, at least as far as the basic knowledge. And I would assume that was because kitchen knowledge would have been handed down from generation to generation, which unfortunately nowadays our culture is a little bit different. Thank God I was in the kitchen with my grandma at a very young age. When my parents had the restaurant across the road, La Grilla, I would get shipped up to Grandma and Aunt Rosie's house for the weekend, which I loved. It was like having additional sets of parents and grandparents. Got spoiled rotten, but I was able to just watch and learn, and they would incorporate, you know, activities in the kitchen for my cousins and myself. So we'd jump in and help out, and then, you know, jump back out and play with our Barbie dolls and come back in. So even though I wasn't in the kitchen all the time with my grandma and Aunt Rose, nor with my parents, I mean, I was in there, you picked up a lot and you learned a lot just by being involved and running in and running out. So nowadays our culture is a little bit different, so we don't really have that. So I would encourage you now, during our 2020 distancing, to get your kids in the kitchen. Of course, you'll see mine aren't in here, but to get your kids in the kitchen and to let them help out and let them jump in and let them be a part of, you know, of the process. And even though they may not do it from start to finish, when they finally get married, they're going to go, oh, I remember watching Grandma, I remember watching my dad, how they did that. Because honestly, I really didn't cook until I got married. So that's a little side bit of information. So my oven's preheating 350. I have one of my little loaf pans. It doesn't say a loaf pan, but that's what I did. Well buttered with softened unsalted butter. And we're going to go ahead and mix our dry ingredients together. So I'm going to kind of bop you around. Just bear with me. Love to see you all on here this morning. All right. So we have in my bowl with a sifter, as you know, always sift the flour, sift my flour, baking powder, all of that, unless it's going into a food processor or into a blender, and it just helps everything get mixed in together. So we're going to put in 2 cups of flour. So let me go ahead and, my camera is actually on the flour bucket right now, because it's just more convenient. So I'm just going to put in 2 cups of flour. That's 1 and 2. I don't pack it in, I just kind of scoop it into the measuring cup, one level it off, and then that's done. I also am going to put in here 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder, 2 teaspoons. We use aluminum-free baking powder, always. You can just get that online if your store doesn't have it. Don't need the aluminum. Get enough aluminum and everything else. Okay, so that's 2 teaspoons. Aluminum-free baking powder. And we're also going to put in a half a teaspoon of salt. And we always use a kosher salt as well. And that's going to be a half teaspoon. There we go. We're just going to sift this together, incorporating everything. And you'll see that sometimes baking powder or the baking soda, even the flour, will have like lumps on the bottom. This will just help get rid of that. If you do have lumps, use the back of whatever you have. Push it through this little sifter. I still turn it upside down because the kosher salt's kind of big. So I want to go ahead and make sure that all the salt is in there. And then I give it just an additional whisking to incorporate. So those are my dry ingredients. I also have sugar, which of course is a dry ingredient. Hence the reason why I messed it up the first time, because it said all dry ingredients. I figured, oh, sugar, that's dry. Then we're going to take 1 egg. I'm going to use my stand mixer. 1 regular egg, large egg. And that's going to get beaten on low. Particularly loud when you have 1 little egg in like a 7-quart mixer. So we have our egg getting mixed up. And we're going to add the sugar to the egg. And the sugar is going to be 3/4 of a cup of sugar. So I got my sugar, 3/4 of a cup measure. My egg's been mixing, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of slowly add this into the egg mixture as it mixes. Not all at one time, kind of like in little bursts, if you will. And let that get all incorporated. So it's going to cream together, if you will. And then in just a few minutes, we're going to go ahead and add in 1 cup of milk and 2 tablespoons of melted butter. We use unsalted butter, always. I think I've said that 100 times already. This has the salt in it, so I'm really not worried about it. Plus, I already tasted it, and it doesn't need any more salt. If you're using salted butter, then you don't need to add in the salt into the mixture. So let's go ahead. I have my spatula, and I'm just going to make sure that everything is off the sides. Go ahead and turn that off before you stick your spatula in there. Push it down real quick. Anything on the sides can go ahead and get incorporated. This looks nice and creamy. It almost looks like kind of like vanilla pudding as far as the color goes, because we have our egg that's creamed together with our sugar. I'm going to put that back on. And now I'm going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of melted butter. I already have my butter melted with my 2 tablespoon measuring spoon in there already. That's done. I'm going to be adding 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. Always pure. Don't get the imitation stuff. So that's going to be 2 teaspoons. Now the other previous recipes, I didn't do it, but when I tasted it, I thought, gee, it would be kind of nice if it had a little citrus in there, maybe a little orange peel. Well, I have lemon, because when I juice lemons for other recipes, in order to use as much as possible, I do the lemon or the orange or whatever citrus it is, and I go ahead and I use the mandolin. You wash your fruit first, by the way, dry it. Use the mandolin. Get your skin, your excess here, your shavings, and then put in a little piece of wax paper. Stick it in the fridge, and it'll dry out. It won't get nasty or anything like that. So this gets really fine. You can also, once it's dried, stick it in the freezer in a little container. And then anytime you want to add some nice fresh zest to your baking or your cooking, sweet or savory, you can go ahead and do that. So this is already ready. I'm going to add in a nice sprinkle, probably a teaspoon, into the egg mixture. Likewise, I could add it into the dry mixture. That's just going to give another layer of flavor. I'm going to go ahead and add in 1 cup of milk. I just have regular whole milk. Just kind of pour it in relatively slowly so it's not going to splash all over the place. Alright, that's good. And then we're going to scrape down the sides again. But I just want to take 1 check to make sure I have everything, since this is new. That's my dry. Okay, so I have the beaten egg. I added the sugar. I creamed it together, added the melted butter, added the milk, and of course then I added my 2 extra ingredients. So that's done. Got my spatula back. I'm going to shut that off, bring it down, scrape down the sides 1 more time. The butter is melted, but because butter is going in with, and it was melted and then I kept it at room temperature, it wasn't piping hot. But because the butter is going in with the cold milk, the butter then starts to harden a little bit. So I'm just going to make sure that's mixed really well. Excellent. That is done. And now I'm going to go ahead and take my wet, put it into my dry, and incorporate it gently and fold it gently. Generally with baking, whether it's muffins or bread, quick breads, zucchini breads, things like that, scones. Yeah, we're getting there with the scones. I will get to the recipes for scones. Still working on that. You don't want to overmix things. So sometimes a recipe will say, lumps are okay, or ribbons of flour are okay. So this recipe doesn't say that, but just going based upon my knowledge, we're not going to overmix it. All right, so now we are going to pour our wet into our dry. I'm just going to do it 1 shot, grabbing everything from the bottom. So far this is a really easy recipe. I think anybody would be able to do this, because I don't think you could mess it up too much. Look at me, I didn't do the first one the right way and it still came out okay. All right, and then we're gonna go ahead and just mix this. And I'm gonna grab this with one hand. I'll do my chompy thing, my one arm. Oops, there's my arm. Okay, and I will bring you guys here. There we go. And I'm just gonna bring this around and mix it in. I would think you could do other flavors as well. Okay, and grabbing the sides, I always use a curved spatula. And I think we're just about done here. It is a little bit more difficult to do it with one hand. All right, I'm going to bring this over to my prepared loaf pan. And let's put you right here. That'll work. Got my wall art, it's all backwards, but you know, knead, bake, chop, slice, simmer, simmer, simmer. All right, there we go. Much easier with two paws. All right, and we're gonna go ahead again, prepared pan. It smells beautiful too, oddly enough. There's really not much in here, but I guess it's between the vanilla and the butter, a little bit of that lemon. Smells really nice. I would think most of you have these ingredients in your house now. I know that there's some shortages on things, but it's not like for the butter, for example. It's only 2 tablespoons, so that's great. It's not a huge, gargantuous amount of butter. So that's it. It's all done. I'm going to put it in the oven. It's going to come out like that. Lovely, lovely. I baked it, well, I used a 20-minute timer, and then I spun it because my oven's temperamental. I'd be dangerous if I actually had some real equipment in here. No, I do have real equipment. It's just temperamental. And this is what it looks like when it's all cut. So we're gonna go ahead and make up a fresh pot of coffee. We grind our coffee for every pot, ground fresh. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Love you guys. Keep in touch. Stay tuned and share, like, post. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.